I'm a bad motherfucker.
Okay, guess what? Tucker Carlson, bombshell, said he tried to get an interview with Boris Johnson. Well, let's just play it for you. Here it is.
So I'm over in Moscow. I'm waiting to do this interview. It gets out that we're doing it. And I'm immediately denounced by this guy called Boris Johnson, who was for a short time the prime minister of Great Britain. And Boris Johnson calls me a tool of the Kremlin or something. And I'm thinking, well, that's kind of, I mean, his name's not actually Boris, as I'm sure you know. His name is Alex Johnson. He called himself Boris in high school. So the guy who calls himself Boris is accusing me? So I was annoyed. So I put in a request for an interview with Boris Johnson, as I have many times because he's constantly denouncing me as a tool of the Kremlin. He says no. So I'm thinking about saying I'm getting more annoyed. So I know a lot of people who know Boris Johnson. So I reach out to them. Finally, one of his advisors gets back to me and says, he will talk to you, but it's going to cost you $1 million. He wants $1 million in US dollars, gold, or Bitcoin. No, this just happened yesterday or 2 days ago. And I'm like, he wants $1 million. Yeah. And then he will talk to you about Ukraine. He will explain his position on Ukraine and explain what. So he attacks me without explaining how I'm wrong, of course, or how he's right. This is, by the way, the guy who single-handedly, at the request of the U.S. government, stopped the peace deal in Ukraine a year and a half ago and is, I think, for that reason, responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people. He won't explain any of that to me in an interview until I pay him $1 million. And I said to the guy, I just interviewed Vladimir Putin. I'm not defending Putin, but Putin didn't ask for $1 million. So you're telling me that Boris Johnson is a lot sleazier, a lot lower than Vladimir Putin.
Okay.
Which is true.
Yeah.
So this whole thing is a freaking shakedown. Why $60 billion? I mean, I could get boring on this because I've learned a lot about it. But $60 billion is not going to allow Ukraine to prevail over Russia. No honest person thinks that's going to work. This is a money laundering operation. A lot of the people involved in it making money from it. And if you're making money off a war, you can deal with God on that because that's really immoral. Like that's actually really, really wrong. And a lot of people are, including Boris Johnson.
So that's what we just were talking about a second ago about I thought war profiteering was supposed to be a sin and something you're embarrassed about. Boris Johnson denies demanding $1 million to be interviewed by Tucker Carlson. And you know why? Because he's a liar. That's why he denies it. Boris Johnson has denied. The U.S. presenter accused the former prime minister of requesting the payment equivalent to around £800 for the booking. Mr. Johnson's team dismissed this account as untrue. Really? The people who lie about everything? Isn't that weird? And Tucker Carlson, who got fired for telling the truth about the Ukraine war and about Big Pharma? Isn't that weird? He's claiming Mr. Carlson had been the one to make the offer. They say Tucker Carlson.
Well, so then why didn't the interview happen?
Yeah.
If he made the offer.
So if Tucker Carlson offered you $1 million to interview you, why wouldn't you take that? They said Mr. Johnson initially accepted, provided the money went solely to Ukrainian veteran charities. This is such bullshit. But he decided not to go ahead with it after the death of Russian opposition leader Aleksander.
That explains everything.
Oh, because of Alexei Navalny. So if you believe that, I've got a vaccine I'd like to sell you. So there it is. So who do you think the sleazebag is in this story? Does that make any sense to anybody that he was going to take the million? So, by the way, you're denying $1 million in relief to Ukraine war veterans because of Russia killed Alexei Navalny, because you claim Russia killed Alexei Navalny, which they didn't. But so what does that have to do with giving $1 million to Ukraine war? That's all bullshit. That's all. So he was going to do the interview for $1 million. But okay, wow. Go ahead.
You could have used the platform to celebrate the glorious white national anti-Muslim stances of Alexei Navalny. You could have used the platform for that. Tucker has an enormous platform. Why would you not take the money where they're limited? He's not claiming there were limitations on what he could talk about. So you could have talked about that.
I still can't get over the fact that the guy's name isn't really Boris.
It's not even
who chooses
Boris.
to be called Boris? Who changes their name to Boris? Like, why? I'd rather be called asshole than Boris. Who's born Alex Johnson? That's a nice name. You change it. No, call me Boris. But no, I mean, him saying, look, of course it's nonsense. Boris Johnson just recently came out and said, no, I didn't sabotage the Russia-Ukraine peace deal in April of 2022. He said, I just flew there to let Zelensky know that we had his back should he turn it down. Hey, should you turn this peace deal down, we'll have your back. We'll give you the money to fight. That's not me sabotaging it. That's just me going there and telling him we got your back if you should turn this peace deal down. He's, just transparently full of shit.
Boy, Tucker Carlson, he's like kryptonite to these motherfuckers, man. It's really amazing. They come in contact with him and they just get immediately exposed for being the Jon Stewart included, right? Jon Stewart tried to come after Tucker Carlson because Tucker Carlson's got way more balls than Jon Stewart has, and Tucker Carlson's actually telling truths that gets you fired from a job, whereas Jon Stewart will never do that. If Jon Stewart was going to tell you a truth that got himself fired, he would be fired. He's not. That's why he still works for the machine. There's only 6 media companies in the whole country, and Jon Stewart has worked for one of them his entire life. Okay. Anything you wanted to add there, Russ? I heard you want to say something.
No, just if you watch these monologues that Jon Stewart is doing that are, stirring up so much controversy, that's a good measure for exactly how far they'll let you go, and no further. That's it. The little shtick he pulled in the Jewish monologue where he tricked people into applauding for things they were actually saying about Russia in regards to Ukraine. That's the limit. That's the outer limit. And Stewart, I think, as you point out, he got his mind right. He found out where that limit was, and he's going to go out there for these weekly appearances and pose as somebody who's really challenging authority, but he's always going to keep it inside a safe lane.
And let's remember when Jon Stewart came out to promote the last show he was doing, that failed show no one watched on Apple TV because it was horrible. The problem, turns out the problem was that show. That problem was horrible. Yeah. That show was horrible. But when he went on YouTube to promote it, he didn't come to this show because he would have been asked a hard question. He went on Breaking Points. The new mainstream. And that's why they're the new mainstream. Okay, over to Steph.
All righty, here we go.
I'm Josh Shakespeare.
I'm Chris Keene.
And this is pretty bad news. California homeless people were found living in caves 20 feet below street level. Apartments.com have listed the caves at $2,300 with utilities included.
After a San Francisco area school hired a company called Woke Kindergarten to train teachers, they reported some of the lowest reading scores in the state. To be fair, it's hard to teach people how to read when every word is offensive.
Hey, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there for more AM Joy.